Hello, my name is Bill Haley, and this is for Haley 2024, The Movements, Government Reform Ideas. Now this video is going to be on civil liberties. How is the new Constitution I'm proposing, the CRA, Competitive Regulatory Agency Structure Amendment I am proposing, and the new full Constitution, how is that going to address civil liberties? Because one of the most important parts of advancement of society and having a good society is a proper respect for civil liberty from the government. So let's go over the whole Constitution. I'm going to try to do it in about 5 to 7 minutes so you can understand the whole thing, but I have a much longer overviews, and every part of this Constitution, every aspect of what I'm going over, I have 30 to 40, sometimes 50-minute discussions about. So I'm doing several dozen videos between February and I'll probably finish up in July, about a dozen more that I'll be doing throughout 2021. So February through probably July, I'll probably finish up. Then I'll start something new. But let's go over the Constitution. So we separate all government power into 30 sectors. Elected top leaders per sector. No one person can be over top of more than one sector at a time. When I talk about a sector, I'm talking about the healthcare sector, the finance sector, family law, environmental sector, labor law, land and water, transportation. Right now, politicians are in control over all of that. If you're at federal level, state level, or local level, you control everything from law enforcement to diplomats to family law to food to education to manufacturing. Too much for one person to handle. I separated all that out so people who have experience and wisdom in education can do education. People who love to do labor law can do labor law. People who have experience in transportation, they can run for elected office, executive, legislative positions in transportation. People who really love land and water, or the environment, human resources, identity, whatever you want, have a passion in, you run for that. Then the voters get to vote per sector. So it's highly important. This is at the city level, state level, and the federal level. This Constitution is one Constitution that has a federal aspect, a state aspect, and a city or local aspect. So let's go through this. Within each sector, at every level of government, you first select your CRA. It's competitive governance, competitive regulatory agencies. These are full governmental systems with executive, legislative, and judicial powers. They regulate, they govern, and they send representatives up to the monopolized sector board level. Only things that can go up to the monopolized sector board level is things that cause significant negative externalities. It's causing harm outside of the transaction, outside of what you're trying to do. You're polluting too much and the like. We'll go over that in other videos. There's a lot on that. Civil liberties is going to be a big part of that. So we're going to be doing rating floors on that. Now on the other side is the exact same structure, same setup, but it's a rating agency. It's giving high quality information from a wide variety of perspectives, but it can also put rating floors to keep things at the CRA level. Rating floors allow standards not to get so low that's causing negative externalities. If it's causing negative externalities and you drop below a rating floor that is designated as a negative externality, then you have to raise your standards up, or you cannot be a CRA. You cannot be a competitive government. So these are private sector / government. These are part each because they're private because they only govern their members, but it's public because it is government. But they only govern their members. I join one that governs me. My neighbor joins one that governs them. Unless we have the same, we select the same one, then we are governed differently per sector. Now, obviously, some things need to go up to the sector board level. That's monopolized because it's creating negative externalities. Not too much. We have a whole system on that. Let's go through this a little bit further, and we'll see how it goes. But before I go past this one, we switch everything to either competitive governance or to the free enterprise system. From social security, from education, roads, all the violent crime mitigation system, from the defining violent crime to law enforcement to the courts to the prisons, all free enterprise or competitive governance. Now, obviously, defining violent crime needs to have one definition, but education, environmental law, finance law, healthcare law, that can be individualized. That can be CRAs. That can be competitive governance. I get governed by the one I choose. My neighbor gets governed by the ones they choose. A healthcare company chooses what healthcare CRA they want to be governed by. And I, as a consumer of healthcare goods, I look at that and determine whether I want to go with that doctor or that healthcare provider. Okay, let's keep on going because there's a longer review. Citizenship is the section 1, general laws section 2, bylaws is internal governance of each organization within this. Federal, state, and local, how that's separated out. Original authority, which is top level authority at the CRA level, sector board level, which level has original authority, which is top level authority. And then state, federal, and local, which one has top level authority on that, and how's that authority divvied up, and who makes that final decision. Supermajority, if it's monopolized, it has to have a supermajority vote. That's going to keep a lot of things at the competitive regulatory agency. So it's a 70% supermajority. Parent sector board, how that's structured, they're going to be separating all government power into 30 sectors and defining the lines. CRA sector boards, they're in charge of one sector. At the federal level, state level, or local level, each one has a sector board. And they're made up of representatives from the CRAs. Competitive regulatory agencies is the base of this whole thing. 90% of what this is CRAs. Everything else in this is to support the CRAs. The rating system is to give high quality information from a wide variety of perspectives. And what's most important about the civil liberties aspect of this video is rating systems give rating floors, meaning you cannot have standards so low that you violate civil liberties. But low in pollution, low standards for a lot of different things. But the aspect of we're dealing with now on this video is civil liberties. You cannot have standards so low within your law enforcement, private law enforcement, that you're violating civil liberties. You cannot have standards so low in your prisons or your court system that you're violating civil liberties. You cannot say that you cannot have free speech, freedom of religion, freedom of association, freedom to petition your government, which is going to change a lot because your CRA and your RA, that's your representative. Right now, the high majority of the people do not have representatives representing their interests and their opinions. High majority of the citizens in the United States do not like either Joe Biden or Donald Trump or Hillary Clinton or Barack Obama. You go right down the line. And while they do have their supporters, a high majority do not, because they did not vote for them in the primary, or they might like them for their prison policy, but not their welfare policy. They might like them for their warfare policy, but not their education policy. They might like this governor or that governor for one issue or another. So you see that we have a big difference there. We don't have representation right now. Rating agencies and CRAs, competitive regulatory agencies, they're going to be your representatives because you select them. They're going to be competing for your business. So they're going to be representing you and they're going to be competing by giving you the best representation possible. Right now, politicians don't need to do that. Anyway, taxation, everything that government currently does is going to be done by the private sector or competitive governing, and you're going to be paying through your CRAs. So we're going to change out how we pay for government. It still has to be paid for, but how we pay for it is going to be tremendously different. You select what governing agency, which means you select your taxation. And if you get taxed too low, you always go with the lowest amount. Your services are going to be reflected in that. You're not going to get the best governmental services. And those are incredibly important. Most people think it is a major negative, but it's a negative because it's monopolized to a large degree. Once your road services or your police services or your land and water services, your charities versus welfare, those things are going to be highly important, and they are highly important right now, but we're doing it badly because we're doing it monopolized. Competing to do the best services, that's where we have the major advances in government. Debt, we have a current debt right now. How are we going to switch over? We're going to sell off all of our government assets to the CRAs, and that's going to tremendously pay off a large part of our debt. There's other ways to pay off some of the debt. We'll go through the system. I already have videos on that. Pockets of Freedom is foreign policy, immigration policy, and the like. Look at that video. It's an interesting idea. States partial acceptance per sector. That's there just to try to get this thing passed, get through enough of the states, Article 5 type of states. 75% of the states need to pass this and agree to this to make this happen. So that's to help get that done. The separation of responsibilities and authorities. Let's go through the 30 sectors, and just so you realize that everything's going over to free enterprise or at least competitive governance. We get rid of welfare altogether. We go to a charity system. There is a mandated contribution to charities, but otherwise there's tremendous amount of free enterprise, tremendous amount of individual subjective determination to help the poor in different ways. Family law, religion, foreign protection system, 5 different sectors there. The top diplomat's not going to be the top commander-in-chief, 2 different people. We need to separate those out for proper checks and balances. And then the other sectors have top leaders as well. And you just have to go through those videos to really understand that. Everything's on my website. We're going to get that website looking even better in a month or so when I really finish these videos and really incorporate all the videos into my website. But the website's very, very complete right now. Just not all the videos embedded the way I want it right now because I'm still making the videos. Anyway, violent crime mitigation system. We're talking about civil liberties. Civil liberties is going to have to be respected throughout all 5 of these sectors, from the violent crime to defining violent crime. Prosecutors have to be respect civil liberties. That's where the prosecutors are. Law enforcement itself, they have to respect civil liberties. They cannot they have to get a warrant, a judicial warrant, to go search your houses. So they cannot abuse you. They cannot search your place without being a judicial warrant. The court system, I have a lot on the court system. I did 2 videos concentrating on 2 different aspects of this. This is kind of the court system as well. This video talking about civil liberties, but it's more of a concentration on a broader civil liberties. The prison and correction system obviously has to respect civil liberties, and let's go over it. Here's 5 more sectors. Each one of these, financial and insurance, you're going to have your financial CRA protect your interest. Your identity sector, your identity business, protecting your interest, and those are civil liberties. They're going to help protect your information, your records, whether it's criminal record, health records, education records, anything dealing with ownership or citizenship. It's going to protect your civil liberties within that, your privacy and the like. Food, education, manufacturing, human resources, sales, identity. Identity is huge on this. They're going to be in charge of citizenship, ownership, records, criminal records, education records, certificates. They're going to be in charge of a lot of things, so that they're going to be major in this. These are 5 more sectors, maybe not so much civil liberties within this, but I'm sure it'll touch on some civil liberties in different aspects. But the other sectors are just going to be more. Mainly the violent crime mitigation system, and to a large degree, the foreign protection system, the military and the like, they're going to have to respect civil liberties too. That's going to be involved in that. The military has to respect civil liberties as well. Okay, CRAs, they're full governmental systems. They regulate, they govern, and they send representatives. They're at the city, state, and federal level. Always important to keep on remembering and coming back to this screen and how this is structured. The structure of this alone is going to make it very difficult for government to infringe on your freedom of speech, your freedom of religion, your freedom of association, your freedom to petition your government, your freedom of I think I said association, definitely your Second Amendment rights, your freedom to bear arms and have weapons. Fourth Amendment, Fifth Amendment, your definitely the Third Amendment, but that's not really relevant. We haven't been housing troops in people's houses for a long time. But Fifth Amendment, I believe, yeah, Fifth Amendment, you cannot, there's protections of the Fifth Amendment. I'm forgetting all of it right now. I know self-incrimination and anyway, there's a few more in there. Slipping my mind right now. I know there's death penalty or cruel and unusual punishment somewhere in there. Definitely the 14th Amendment and the like. So all these things, when you choose your CRA, they're going to be protecting your civil liberties. Some might have regulations against some of that that you might not like. Then don't choose that CRA. Most of the protections are going to be at the sector board level. The CRAs are not going to govern people outside their membership. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, so let's keep on going. Because you might not understand a couple of things I just said, because I just realized I haven't got to those slides yet. I need to build up to it. Civil liberties. Okay, some of these are not clauses. I'm going to have a little not clause if it's not a clause, but then there are definitely some clauses from the Constitution that's in here. So I'm using a little bit of just normal language and some other clauses that are constitutional clauses that I created here. Two types of civil liberties. So this is not a clause, but it's embedded within the clauses. There's two types of civil liberties. What monopolized government cannot stop a citizen from doing. So what's an example of that? Freedom of speech. So monopolized government should not be able to stop you from speaking whatever you have to say. Now, there are slander laws because you are actually harming somebody. When you harm somebody, there can be a cause of action against you in a court of law, and we will have court of laws. They cannot stop you from doing religion. Obviously, there's going to be a very small amount of infringing on somebody else's liberty when you have freedom of religion. If you have child sacrifice or something like that, I know that goes way to the extreme, but you're not going to be able to infringe on anybody's civil liberties within freedom of religion unless you go to the extreme and start hurting somebody else. Freedom of the press, freedom of association, freedom to possess weapons, freedom of travel, freedom to own property, freedom to trade freely with others and have freedom of contract, and to have and raise children. Government cannot stop you from doing any of these things. Monopolized government should not be able to stop you from saying what you want to say, practicing your religion, saying what you want to say in articles and in the press, possessing a weapon. Obviously, you cannot possess a grenade launcher and a few other major weapons of war. We're not talking about regular rifles. Semi-automatic is definitely okay. I have a very strong Second Amendment clauses within this. But there is a level that you cannot go beyond, obviously. You cannot have tanks running through the streets. Travel, freedom of travel is definitely important. Government should not be able to stop you from traveling, especially within America. Own property or leaving America. Free trade is something that is being infringed dramatically right now, and we should have a free trade clause. Not just free trade from other countries, but I'm talking free trade within citizen to citizen. It is dramatically infringed right now. Have and raise children, those are highly important, and there's clauses regarding children in there. Okay, the second type of civil liberty. What the government cannot do in the criminal justice system outside of established norms with judicial accountabilities. So government cannot come in and look at your papers. They cannot go search your house. They cannot do these things without going through the established norms, without getting a judicial warrant, showing evidence. So there is a way to do it, and there's a way not to do it. So first, government cannot infringe on your liberties by stopping you from doing things that you're allowed to do. Then government cannot use law enforcement or other government people with governmental power to go infringe on your liberties, searching your house, searching your cars, eavesdropping, searching your mail, and the like. So what are the examples of that one? First of all, they have to get judicial warrants before they're allowed to do any of these. So they're allowed to do it, but somebody has to show that you are infringing on somebody else's liberty. you are infringing on somebody else's liberty, we have evidence that you murdered somebody, you raped somebody, then they can go in because you infringed on somebody else's liberty, or at least there's evidence that you might have, and it went past the judge's norms. The judges have norms, so they have to get a judicial warrant to be. And judges, if they abuse that warrant process, which it could be dramatically into the free enterprise system, dramatically into the competitive governance, but they have to abide by the norms. If a judge abuses his power and does a judicial warrant against one of a political enemy of somebody that gave him a donation or whatever, paid him a bribe or whatever the case may be, there's ways to hold that person accountable. They're not going to be able to be a judge. That evidence can be thrown out. There's processes. Okay, so this one is to be secure in their persons. Government cannot come in and investigate their person, their what's in people's pockets, what's in somebody's wallets, what they have, their own, what they own, what a person owns. Houses, papers, records, documents, effects. No soldier shall be quartered in any house. The right to privacy. Government cannot go in and invade your privacy. Self-incrimination and torture. So this is not a clause, but these are some of the examples of liberties. I do have clauses that deal with all of this, and I have clauses that even deal with things that are not in the Constitution by doing having a representative body called a rating system, and the judicial branch of that rating system, and letting them, the rating system is a section of the judicial sector. So I just said that a little bit wrong. The judicial sector has a rating system, and that rating system has a judicial branch. Anyway, so just wanted to make sure we had that clear. So these are some of the but these are two different types of civil liberties. One, government's not stopping you from doing something. The one, in order to investigate a crime, government cannot, or government officials who have government power cannot do certain things outside of the norms. Then the due process clause. This is part of the second one. A legal obligation of all states, or legal obligation of all governments. An assurance that government must operate within the law and provide fair procedures. So those have to be done. I have many clauses, especially in the judicial sector, that create a system where what am I trying to say? Well, it just has to be fair. The rating floors will not allow you to have standards so low that you're not going to have fairness. You have a lot of experimentation, but it has to be above a certain standards. You cannot have experimentation where you're not being fair to the plaintiff or to the defendant. Okay, I just wanted to let you see the 5 different sectors again. I'm not going to go over this again, but each one of these have aspects of civil liberties. Definitely law enforcement is the big one. Prisons and corrections, you're taking away someone's civil liberties to put them in a prison. And you're controlling them, but they still have some certain civil liberties. They don't give up all of the civil liberties. They give up where they have to be because they're behind bars. Or it could be parole as well, but there's a lot of aspects. There could be watches that have GPS or anklets that have GPS and that can help control somebody. Anyway, every aspect. Oh, the law enforcement authorization, the LEA, they're going to be big into making sure they pull anybody's badge, anybody's authorization to have governmental power if they violate civil liberties. So we have rating floors, we have the LEA, we have people just not wanting to hire people who are violating civil liberties. Nobody wants to go through a court system that has people violating the civil liberties. If a business wants to sue you and they're using a court system that is not very good on civil liberties, maybe they're just a little bit above the rating floor on civil liberties, but they're really not that great on it. People aren't going to, there's going to be a rating on that door. When you walk into that business and you see, hey, if we have a discrepancy, you're going to have to go through our court system, and our ratings show that we don't have the best of court systems. you're probably going to go across the street to the next shop and do your business there. That rating level is going to be so highly important. It's going to let you know which company is better environmentally, better with work safety, better with labor law, better with a lot of aspects. But courts and civil liberties is going to be part of that. A defendant's judicial authority CRA must supply a lawyer to the defendant in violent crime cases. So to protect somebody's civil liberties, I always have an organization that the defendant, by the way, they selected well ahead of being in trouble with the law. They selected that judicial authority CRA. So if you don't want one that's bare bones and only hiring new lawyers without much experience and they're not getting the cream of the crop, then you're paying a very little amount, but that's going to come back and bite you by having not the best of services. CRA Section 10, the rating system will be responsible to secure civil liberties. And let's talk about how that's going to be. The rating system is made from a dozen RAs, representatives of citizens. So RAs are representative bodies. I select the one I like, my neighbor selects the one they like, my lady down the street selects the one that she likes. Everybody selecting their CRA or their RA is going to be highly important. That RA has the representative power of the percentage of the people in that jurisdiction that picked them, that selected them, that became members in their RA. So if a RA has 6% of the people, and another RA has 12% of the people, well, that 12% is representing twice as many people, 12% versus 6%. So that representative power, they're going to have more representative power. So that's highly important to understand. Now, you might have two different RAs that are very similar, but have a little bit of differences. And so that 12% and that 6% might be all merged together for 90% of the stuff, but that 10% is important as well. So, but they'll work together. They're your representatives representing your opinions and your interests. And if you don't like how you're being represented, you can switch to a different RA that better matches your philosophy of how you want to be representative, your interests, your opinions. Your selection gives your RA more representative authority to make rating floors. Rating floors are going to be important. Civil liberty rating floors are going to be extremely important. Here's a structure again. You pick the RA that you want, and that's going to give that RA more power. Everybody picks it, all the RAs added up, about a dozen of them, will add up to 100%. Your RA represents you. So, and they have to have, I think, a 50% for a civil liberty rating floor. Let's go over it. And actually, some civil liberty rating floors are 30%, some are 40%. There's different aspects. So let's go through it. The rating system. I know I had full videos on the rating system. I go over some of this, but this is specifically on the civil liberties, so I'm going to try to stay without the full rating system, but aspects of it. A rating floor is a rating level set by the rating system. A CRA must not drop below. A CRA must increase regulatory standards to achieve a rating level above the rating floor. And now, it might not be on this set of slides, but a rating floor can only be set for negative externalities. Significant negative externality. It has to have a threshold to be significant, and it has to be a negative externality. Harming people outside the transactions and what's going on out there. You're polluting, and but a significant negative externality, that pollution has to get to a certain degree before somebody else can do anything about it. So there's a lot of aspects. There's a lot of to learn in that. It could be pollution. It could be noise pollution. It could be building codes where, hey, you have a AC unit that could be blown over in the wind, fall down on the sidewalk below you and hurt somebody. So your standards are really low. You cannot have standards that low. Go up and secure that AC unit. That kind of stuff. There's a lot of aspects. Let me make sure. Okay. A rating floor may not be regulatory in nature. So we have to make sure we're not making these regulatory in nature. It's not you have to put this filter on to filter out the pollution. No, you cannot have but so much pollution in, or you can increase your standards by mitigating the effects of the pollution somewhere else. So maybe you're allowed to pollute some, but you mitigate by having you doing something else to help the environment that can compensate. So there's a lot of ways to get around it, but it can't be regulatory in nature. Rating floors should always allow multiple methods of regulations to achieve the goal of reducing significant negative externalities. So, I know we're talking about civil liberties. Civil liberties is relevant here. I know went to pollution, but going back to civil liberties, if you want your freedom of, I can't come up with a good example right now because the full structure of this is going to stop the in violating of the civil liberties tremendously because the structure just does not allow it to a large degree because it's competitive governance. You choose who's going to govern you. And do you really want to choose a CRA that's going to govern you in such a way that restricts your civil liberties? Some people are because they don't want to do certain things anyway and they want better ratings. And it's going to create a better society. It's going to create better results. But some people, they want full set of civil liberties and they're willing to take worse results. Some people, they don't want to do certain things with certain civil liberties and they'll accept a CRA that says we're going to violate a civil liberty here for our members that voluntarily selected us and they want this, just like a homeowner association saying I don't want my neighbor's grass growing 10 feet high and a broken down car in their front yard. You chose that. You chose to have more confined laws, more confined regulations on yourself so your neighbor cannot create negative externalities. Let's keep on going because there's so many examples and it's hard to come up with a civil liberty, a freedom of religion, a freedom of speech, a freedom of association that's going to show a negative externality to a large degree enough that a CRA is going to harm it. But because the full structure of this is just not going to allow the civil liberties to be violated very easily. But I have the civil liberty rating floors regardless because we don't want the sector board to even think that they can do this. And if for some reason, if two come into conflict, they have to do strict scrutiny, which means they both have to nearly tailor what they're doing, not to violate each other as much as possible. The rating system must set a rating floor for regulations dealing with significant negative externalities. Talked about that. Civil liberty rating floors are defined in this amendment as limitations of sector board action. It's important to understand that we're talking about monopolized sector board action that infringe civil liberties. Civil liberty, so that's more of the freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of religion. You can join a CRA that infringes one, but you cannot. But the sector board cannot force it. But because you selected that, then there's no problem because you selected to have those extra restrictions on yourself because you know there might be a benefit to having that better constriction of your liberties. Now, if you don't want that, you want your full liberties, pick a CRA that doesn't. It's hard to come up with an example of freedom of speech or freedom of religion aspect where that's going to be a factor, or freedom of association where that's going to be a factor. But our current government is restricting a lot right now. They're infringing on a lot of civil liberties because that's monopolized government. So in order to have health care done by government, they have to restrict a tremendous amount of your liberties. To have education done by the government, you have to restrict a tremendous amount of liberty. But if it's done in the competitive governance, you select ones. So if you want to select a public school type of education, you can. Other people select another one. You pick who's going to be governing you. Right now, everybody's losing civil liberties because of monopolized version of education, monopolized version of law enforcement, the monopolized version of transportation. Transportation doesn't violate so many civil liberties, but you know where I'm going. Definitely the welfare, monopolized governance of taking care of the poor, monopolized governance of the education, to large degrees I'm talking about, is tremendously violating civil liberties. I mean, the public school system is not even close to being constitutional. You can look at my video on that. I have well over an hour-long video going through constitutional clauses, Supreme Court decisions, going through the whole 9 yards, and it's just overwhelming. I don't have to take an hour and a half to make one point. I'm making dozens of points throughout the hour and a half, dozens upon dozens, a point every couple minutes that makes it unconstitutional. Anyway, so let's keep on going. Civil liberty violations in this amendment regard actions by a rating system or a sector board restricting citizens, organizations, or businesses from engaging in activities cited as civil liberties. That's the version 1 of it, type 1. Freedom of association, freedom of religion, freedom of press, freedom of petition of the government, and the like. Government's not allowed to stop you from doing that. That's the sector board level stopping you. Okay, then the second one is sector board action, laws, and regulations attempting to solve negative externalities and societal negative externalities must respect other civil liberties with strict scrutiny. That's what I was talking about, how they have to nearly tailor how they are going to deal with a negative externality that might, on the fringes, violate another civil liberty. They have to really tailor so you're not violating another civil liberties unless you really, really have to. And that's how you butt both of them together. And the rating systems and the rating floors, the representatives there, they're going to make that decision to a large degree. Not the judges, but the representatives of the people. Let's keep on going. I know there's so many examples within this, and I could talk for an hour trying to give example after example, but I'm doing the structure and representative bodies within rating systems and some CRAs, but mostly rating systems for these civil liberty violations are going to be rating systems. So let's continue going. The CRA structure of CRAs only governing their members will address this civil liberties issue 99% of the time. That's what I was getting to a little bit earlier. The CRA structure, where you get to pick your governing agency that only governs their members, is going to solve 99% of the problems. If you're enjoying your civil liberties by saying something, practicing your religion, associating with other people, start significantly infringing on somebody else's liberty, then they can step in. But it's hard to understand how religion, freedom of speech, and freedom of association is going to violate somebody else's civil liberties. Now, it's obviously that if you say, I'm allowed to do child sacrifice for my religion, then that's violating somebody else's rights. So that has to be put a stop to. If you're libeling somebody or slandering somebody, knowingly slandering in a malicious way, then, or you are manipulating the stock market by putting out blatant lies about the value of your company or value of somebody else's company or a scandal that's going on, that is harming somebody else outside of the transaction. That's harming somebody. So your freedom of speech is curtailed there because you're actually doing significant negative externalities. You're harming somebody else. Now, negative externality and specific injury to a person, that there's different examples. If you tank a stock because you put slander out there, put a scandal within that company or whatever, and you are harming all the stockholders, you are harming the company itself, all the employees, you're harming a lot of people. So is it a significant negative externality that's harming people in general, or is it specific to a person, where you slander a specific person? And so there's both there. Let's keep on going, or this will be a 5-hour long video. So I'm hoping to keep this below an hour. We've got 40 minutes in so far. Civil liberties in this amendment are not obligations at the sector board level or rating system level to provide funds, products, or services to the people. Too often in today's language, a lot of people use civil liberties as the obligation of a state to provide. The obligations of a state or the government to provide. So take from somebody, tax the population, and then provide somebody with goods, and they call that a civil liberty. Civil liberty as I have a civil liberty to civil right to education, civil rights to healthcare. So some people say that. It's a wrong way of using that language. Because you are making somebody else pay money to pay a doctor, pay money to pay a teacher, pay money for services to provide you with something. So I'm making it clear in constitutional language. This is a clause in the Constitution that civil liberties cannot be defined, at least in this amendment, as the obligation of a sector board or rating system level to provide funds, products, or services to people. So CRAs can have that obligation if they want to. They can choose within their memberships. You select a CRA that wants to do that, fine. A CRA wants to do it with their own money from their own members, fine. But not from the sector board or rating system. The rating system cannot put a rating floor on that. The judicial authority sector's rating system with a 30% vote, so it doesn't need a tremendous amount of people, may set or increase civil liberty rating floors. Now make sure I say this correctly. Representatives of 30% of the people within the rating system, the judicial authority sector's rating system, being very specific, this is a clause, may set or increase civil liberty rating floors to protect civil liberties, not to violate civil liberties. This is to protect civil liberties. I mean, make sure the language is correct, and we use protect there, and I'll make sure I get English scholars to make sure this is not going to be challenged, saying that it only takes 30% to violate it. No, to protect, and make sure there's no wiggle room there. To protect civil liberties per narrowly drawn category within all sectors. So the freedom of speech, freedom of association. Now, if you get too high of civil liberties, you're going to have problems as well. If you have too high protections on freedom of speech, you allow slander. Too much violations of freedom of travel, then people go into private land. Too much civil liberty of association. I don't know how that's going to affect anything. Anyway, if you have too high of civil liberties within the criminal justice system, and all evidence keeps on getting thrown out, and a murderer keeps on murdering, a rapist keeps on raping, a thief keeps on thieving and stealing, people's civil liberties are being harmed because you're harming by killing, you're harming by raping, you're harming by theft. So there needs to be a balance. And I put that balance at 30% of the can raise civil liberty rating floors. Violent crime mitigation civil liberty rating floors. That's one term, 7 words. I know it's a long term, but with the government, people with government official authority that had to be authorized by the LEA, Law Enforcement Authorization Agency. Within that group, violent crime mitigation, anybody with inherent government power must respect civil liberty rating floors. Their standards have to be above whatever it takes that violates the civil liberties. And again, 30%. I think it takes 75% to lower the civil liberty rating floor, because we don't want civil liberty so strong that murderers keep on getting out because all the evidence gets thrown out. And he murders again. That's a violation of a civil liberties big time because somebody's dead or somebody's raped. Okay, civil liberties are also protections in the violent crime mitigation system. So I've talked about this a lot already, but let me just read the clause. Civil liberties are also protections in the violent crime mitigation system. Violent crime mitigation civil liberty rating floors are restrictions at the sector board level, the CRA level, and anybody with inherent government authority. So anybody has inherent government authority. So it doesn't matter whether it does the other civil liberties, freedom of speech, freedom of association, that just affected the sector board. CRAs, if you select them, you select them. This one is people who can arrest you, people holding guns, people who can put you in prison by the judge and the like. The sector board level, the CRA level, and anyone with inherent government authority. So everybody has to protect civil liberties. Anybody with inherent government power that's authorized to arrest, authorized to hold you in prison, authorized to do any of these things with inherent government power, even the clerk of the court, the sheriffs, everybody. In the violent crime mitigation system, and believe me, if you're in environmental law and somebody does an environmental thing, they have to hire a police that got authorized by the LEA. So you can have education law or finance law, they still have to hire the police. So the police still have to be authorized and they have to abide by the civil liberties. So just because I say civil liberty, the violent crime mitigation system, it's anybody within all 30 sectors for a significant amount. I mean, regardless of what I just said there. Anybody within all 30 sectors can still violate your civil liberties because they can hire a police that violates your civil liberties. But they can't because that police will get their badge pulled. So they're not allowed to. Anyway, in the violent crime mitigation system, every rating system in the violent crime mitigation system with a 30% vote may set or increase violent crime mitigation civil liberty rating floors to protect civil liberties per narrowly drawn category. A 75% vote lowers violent crime mitigation civil liberty rating floors. Now, why is this not 100%? Because there's going to be some people out there where why don't we just have 100% protection of civil liberties? Because murder is going to never get prosecuted because you went into their house and you can never get a judicial warrant and the like. Well, we don't want that. If a murderer keeps on murdering, somebody's going to go over and kill them. No, we want a judicial process. We need a fair judicial process. And the proper percentage, at least what I think, is a 30% to increase, set or increase, and a 75% to lower. So it might change around. We might have to adjust, but I think rating systems and the rating agencies are going to understand where that proper level is and push one way or the other. And everybody's represented, by the way. People without LEA authorization cannot violate civil liberties of other citizens, but that is just called violent crime laws. So I, as a citizen that I do not have a law enforcement badge, I cannot go and stop somebody from, I can't go into somebody else's church and say you cannot practice your religion. I cannot stop somebody from speaking. I definitely can't go violate somebody's rights to arrest them unless it's a proper citizen arrest, which there'll be some standards on that. Everybody will learn through their LEA how to do a proper citizen arrest. Not very often, but there is something called a citizen arrest, so there'll be regulations dealing with that. Probably similar to what it is now, but everyone will learn it. Okay, civil liberties are also protections in the violent crime mitigation system. Violent crime mitigation civil liberty rating floors are restrictions at the sector board level, the CRA level, and anyone with inherent governmental authority. So I already went over this, but it's so important to understand that you understand what's going on here. Every rating system in the violent... Okay, I already finished this one here. I'm just going to keep on going. The judicial authority sector's rating system legislative branch must address all civil liberties in the Bill of Rights, the full U.S. Constitution, and the common law, and then set rating floors for each narrowly defined right. So we're not doing broad rights, we're doing narrowly defined rights. I don't want a dozen rating floors, I want hundreds of rating floors, narrowly drawn, narrowly focused. The civil liberties of the replaced Constitution remain until properly addressed with the rating floor. So a 5-year transition. Sorry. At that time, the rating system should have addressed all the areas. But just in case they don't, it's a clause in there saying, look, they missed one. Everybody understands that this is a right, and if you have to go back to the old Constitution, you can. But if that ever happens within a court system, the court system is going to tell the rating system, narrowly draw that rating floor, and they have to. A 70% vote of the rating system is required to authorize precise areas of regulations that the CRA Sector Board may regulate. So this is more of a rating system. How does a sector board, monopoly sector board, get the authority to regulate anything? The rating system has to try to work first. It has to try rating floors and the like. But then if that does not work, significant negative externalities are still happening. I can't imagine too many scenarios where this would happen. But if that does happen and the rating system says we just cannot do it, it needs to be done at the monopolized sector board level. 70% vote of the rating system is required to do that. Then the CRA is going to have to vote with the 70% vote to make a monopolized regulations across all the whole jurisdiction. And that has to be super narrowly drawn as well, narrowly focused. Rating systems with a 40% vote may set a rating floor for integrity. So I set 40% because we really want good integrity. Not having integrity ruins a lot of different things. And a 70% vote lowers integrity rating floors. Every rating system has original authority to and must address through courts. So the rating system has a court. The lack of integrity to include self-dealing, abuse, corruption, fraud, among others widely defined. So the rating system's courts only address abuse to a large degree. Abuse, lack of integrity, you see all the words I put there. And among others widely defined. So anything dealing with some type of corruption and that type of thing. Self-dealing, when I say self-dealing, illegitimate self-dealing. You're obviously allowed to work for us for income, but we're talking about it's hidden, it's excessive, whatever the case may be. It's not agreed upon and like. Okay, identity, personal, and business. Sector 25 is so important. I went over this earlier, but here's a clause. Well, it's not a clause. Here's a write-up on it. It protects your criminal records. They must give information to the police when thresholds are met. So the police are not going to have criminal records go into a database at any time they want to. They have to go to the person's identity CRA to say, I saw or have evidence to suggest that this person committed a crime. Please turn over some records. And the Sector 25 CRA has to turn over those records. So it has to be online, always accessible. And the police officer, obviously, without knowing who somebody is, can do regular police work. But then once they find out who it is, they have to inform that person's Sector 25 CRA. The identity sectors, that identity businesses is going to protect the defendants, the perpetrators, whatever you want to say, their interest. So they're only going to give information that the police need to know, done by good threshold, by regulations and the like. Identity, personal, and business also protects your medical, education, certificates, citizenship, financial records, ownership records, among other records. Protecting their members' interests. It's highly important to understand we're going to have a governmental body that you select at the CRA level that governs you to protect your interest. These people can come in when you're a prisoner because you were properly convicted to ensure that you get out on time, that your rights are protected. They'll have lawyers working for them, but they will make sure that your interests are protected. Sector 25 CRAs must have continuously open and rapid accessible system for authorized law enforcement personnel to gain criminal record information regarding the CRA members' law enforcement encounters. So, I just talked about this. I'm not going to finish reading all that. If you want to, pause and read it. But this is a checks and balance on having law enforcement or quote unquote government having too much information on somebody. Every sector board must develop a process regarding an arrest through the end of trial that respects civil liberties within this amendment or properly pass civil liberty rating floors. So it's highly important to understand what we're talking about here. Here is a lot of the process. It's on my website. I'm not going to read it through, but basically we're talking about grand juries at the sector board level. Everybody, all the CRAs send representatives up to make a grand jury, professional grand jury, by the way, to a large degree. That's going to protect people's interest and only keep people behind bars that need to be behind bars. It's going to allow anybody who's being held before the trial and the like to be able to have a person they can go, a group of people they can go talk to say, hey, my liberties are being infringed. So there are going to be judges, there's going to be other people. It's a full process. And we can add more to it or adjust what I have in there. It's my first initial, I know I worked on it for a while, but it's my first initial try at that. And we'll get people who really know the court system and know the criminal justice record, the prosecutors and the defense attorneys, and get them both to come to an agreement on how do we hold somebody before a trial. Because some people are being held way too long without a trial. And we have a right to a free and speedy trial within the Constitution. So, and that's not being done right now nearly as much as it should. If the rating floor on the crime rate set by the VC sector, by Sector 11, is exceeded, funding contracts to law enforcement businesses must increase. So, if the crime rate gets too much, certain things click in. You have to fund your law enforcement more. You have to get more police out there. This rating floor counterbalances is a counterbalance because high crime rates are by definition infringements of civil liberties. So what I already talked about, if a murderer goes out, gets released or not prosecuted because such high civil liberties, then they're murdering again, and that's an infringement on civil liberties on someone else's life, and or their body because they got beat up, they got robbed, they got raped, whatever the case may be. So I think I have another one. Let's see. Okay, back to this one. Not only do they have to fund more law enforcement, but prison terms have to get longer. Certain things have to happen in the courts that we make sure that murderers are not being let go as easily. So we put better procedures in. We fund maybe the court system better investigators, better whatever the case may be, to keep the crime rate down. There's a lot of aspects of what we can do to keep the crime rate down. But if a crime rate set by the VC sector, so we're going to have narrowly tailored rape, murder, shootings, theft, car theft, all the different categories, narrowly drawn, a rating floor in each one. Okay, civil liberty protections too strong means allowing perpetrators to harm more people. This CRA structure puts the balance at 30% vote to set or increase protections and a 75% to lower protections per narrowly drawn category. I know I said it, but it's really good to have it written out, and this is exactly what I mean. And that's not a clause, but it's within, that's talking in regular language about what the clauses say and what the clauses do. Okay. The law enforcement sector board must establish regulations regarding authorized police protecting everyone regardless of membership. So that's a civil liberty protection too, because we don't want a law enforcement that got hired by 10% of the neighborhood, but somebody else that's not within that membership is getting robbed, or the house invasion or whatever. No, anybody with a badge has to help anybody with an immediate danger, but then a person's selected, contracted law enforcement business has to come over as fast as they can, and they'll do the investigation and the like. Hopefully they'll have cooperation, so the person first on the scene can maintain it to a certain degree for a while. But as soon as the person's law enforcement company that they contracted with, they can get there and help deal with the situation, then they take over. Every law enforcement officer and law enforcement business must protect everyone regardless of membership within their mandated regulations. That's a clause. The LEA Sector Board must ensure law enforcement officers respect people's civil liberties to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, records, documents, effects, along with all civil liberties as defined by rating floors. That's a clause. The LEA sector authorizes with a 70% vote and repeals authorization with a 40% vote. Yes. That's anybody with inherent government power. The Sector 13 rating system must have a rating floor to ensure suitable staffing of people with inherent governmental authority. So you see a conflict already, and I try to solve that conflict. If we require a 70% vote to authorize somebody with a badge, maybe we can't get a full staffing of the law enforcement sector that we need. We cannot get enough judges, we cannot get enough prosecutors, we cannot get enough prison guards, we cannot get enough law enforcement officers. If we can't, hopefully we can. Hopefully they'll have to cooperate and they'll get there. Everybody cannot be to the extremes. They have to be moral, ethical, and the whole 9 yards, and then people will be more willing to give them a badge. But if it cannot be staffed up, a rating system must have a rating floor to ensure suitable staffing. So, to ensure suitable staffing is a counterbalance to ensure 35% of the people cannot deny everyone with a badge and just not have any police or judges out there. This will force compromise and ensure issues are addressed. So if somebody says, I'm not going to authorize you, and 35% of the people, then people are going to compromise and say, okay, what do we need to change to get law enforcement out here? And people authorized. A CRA within the LEA sector is responsible for law enforcement academies. So these LEAs that you choose, proportionally, so if they have 10%, they're responsible for their 10% of the law enforcement academies. But they're also going to be responsible for their members. You pick one. So you're a member of an LEA. They're going to teach you how to help out with law enforcement, be an assistant, be a guard, what to do with scenario training when a crime happens, what to do, what not to do. They're going to teach people how to handle weapons, to shoot a gun and the like, how to carry a gun, how to be responsible with the gun. They're going to be looking at a lot of different things, and that mission starts at the age of 13. Your LEA will train their members starting at the age of 13 how to deal with law enforcement, rights, best practices, weapon safety, scenario training, all levels of certifications, training to assist such as National Guard, Fire Guard, emergency medical personnel, among others. So I just said it, but I wanted to read it, what I have written down, so you know exactly what we're talking about here. A 70% vote of the Sector 13 Sector Board is required to restrict weapons based on negative externalities. So this is a very strong constitutional clause, a Second Amendment, freedom to bear arms. It takes 70% of this representative body, the Sector Board, to restrict a weapon. So it's going to be a very strong freedom to bear arms. And they can only restrict it based off of negative externalities. A 40% vote lists the restrictions, so we get that 10% spread there. Using these percentages, the Sector 13 Sector Board must create a ranked scale of weapon restrictions based on age. So 18-year-olds might not be able to do as much as a 25-year-old. People with a little bit of training might be able to have better, more advanced weapons. People who have violent crime convictions, they might be restricted. We want them to have some, depending on how bad their violent crime was, but we don't want one indiscretion when somebody's 18 years old to mean they can't have a weapon ever again. So how much violent crime have they done? What weapons are they going to be restricted? We don't want a one-size-fits-all. This weapon's gone for everybody, and this weapon's good for everybody. We want a scale, ranked scale. The right to own, purchase, possess, and carry in public places these weapons is an individual civil liberty. So I say it's a civil liberty, which means it puts at 70 and 40% thresholds on those votes. and these are representatives of the people. The purpose of the judicial authority sector is to provide a high-quality court system for America. It's highly important with civil liberties that we have a high-quality court system, and rating floors are going to make sure it's high quality with the respect of civil liberties. The judicial authority sector board must create a system of judicial warrants that respect civil liberties civil liberties properly passed as civil liberty rating floors. I probably have to put violent crime mitigation civil liberty rating floors in there to keep things consistent, but they have to respect the rating floors in the civil liberties. The judicial branch of the judicial authority sector will be an appellate court establishing case law regarding two or more entities' civil liberties coming into conflict, in which justices must strongly consider civil liberty rating floor levels. I talked about this earlier, but this is a clause. The judicial branch of the judicial authority sector, most of this is going to be at the state level, will be an appellate court establishing case law. So where these two civil liberties come into conflict, and they will on occasion, especially within the civil, especially when law enforcement is trying to investigate a crime. Can they go into somebody's house? When can they go into somebody's house? Hey, I heard a cry of help. I went in to protect somebody, but did they really hear a cry of help? So you have too many false claims like that, and the police officer gets their badge pulled. So there's a lot of ways to deal with integrity. We talked about the rating system dealing with integrity, the law enforcement authorization agency dealing with integrity. It only takes 40%, representatives of 40% of the people, to pull somebody's badge. So we strongly have civil liberty rating floors, and they have to be respected. Within the prison and correction system, they have to respect civil liberties within there. So Sector 15 Sector Board must use the Sector 15 rating systems as a significant factor in funding prison and correction CRAs with the goal of improving ratings. So it's a funding mechanism within the within the prison system to fund prisons in such a way that it will, in large part, lead to better restoration of the crime, compensation for the victim of the crime, reparations to the victims of the crime. I know I use similar words, but they all mean a little bit different. So, but widely defined, making the person that you, helping the victim that you violated, helping them get more whole, as well as low recidivism rates and personal long-term prospering of the people convicted. So not only do we want to make the victim whole, we want what's best for the perpetrator. A lot of people just want to throw them away and say, we're not going to give them any benefits. We just want to put them into prison. And when they get let out of prison, they have a very tough time and they go back to the life of crime. So the personal long-term prospering of the people convicted is highly important. Low recidivism rates. We're paying prison companies for low recidivism rates, which means they're going to follow up with that prisoner, making sure they have a job, a place to live, and out of the influence of bad influences to a large degree, as much as they possibly can. Have a lot of programs out there for the ex-con and like, because that's going to come with money. Okay, pretty much done with this video. I'm just showing how all the sectors are in here, and you can look at each sector, and you can see how civil liberty is going to be important in each one. Education is going to be important. Definitely throughout the military is going to be important. Within the charity system, abuse is going to be a problem. I understand that, but we have a lot of ways to address the abuse within that. Civil liberty abuse is going to be part of the charity system, but we have a lot of problems within the current welfare system. There's no doubt there will be some abuse, because there's abuse in everything in the charity system, but it's a far better system with a lot of accountability, a lot of ways to root out corruption and abuse. Here's 15 more sectors. You can just think about for 10 or 15 minutes each sector, and civil liberties within healthcare, civil liberties within banking, and that civil liberty is going to be more privacy related. And I have clauses within my banking sector saying you can have a private banking account. That's one of the liberties that citizens should have, is a private banking account. Definitely insurance. You can see some civil liberties within that, especially as we switch over Social Security and Medicare to a free enterprise system. Education is full of civil liberty problems. Human resources and sales, that's labor law. Definitely civil liberties within that. Work safety and disability, definitely civil liberties within that. Environmental, you're harming somebody's the environment. That harms everybody. There's rating floors for that. Not so much civil liberty rating floors, but it might come into play. But there's other rating floors dealing with pollution and the like. Identity sector, that's going to be so important to protect your interest, your opinions, your interest in the criminal justice system and elsewhere to protect you. When you get robbed, your identity sector is going to be a big part of that. Now, armed robbery is going to be different because that's going to be a violent crime. Robbing you for when you're not there, that's not so much of a violent crime, even though it's very you feel very violated when you get robbed, even if you're not there. But it goes to the identity sector at that point, so it's highly important. Transportation, not so much civil liberties there. Media and communication, that's where my freedom of speech clause is. That's going to be important. The freedom to own land, freedom to own water rights, that's highly important. That's a civil liberty. That is a liberty, a original right that every citizen has. As long as you're an American citizen, and there's a system to be an American citizen, as long as you're an American citizen, you're allowed to own land. And that's highly important to understand. All land, by the way, all government land goes to the free enterprise system. No government ownership of land. You can have CRAs owning the land, but sector boards, not so much. So always important to come back to this screen. This structure right here, this structure and this structure, you picking who your representative is, you picking your governing body. That's so important to protecting your civil liberties. And okay, let's just finish this video off by saying, okay, hour and 12 minutes, a long video, but civil liberties is something that if you're going to go free enterprise on everything, you have to address free civil liberties. You have to. Free enterprise is not I'll do whatever I want. Liberty is not I can do whatever I want, because once you start infringing on somebody else's rights, then you are now violating somebody else. It's very hard to have everybody have liberty without a system of saying where somebody's liberty starts and when somebody else's liberty stops. You have to have ownership rights. You have to have rules around ownership rights. You have to say who owns this piece of land, and when there's a dispute, there has to be rules set up so people understand what the rules are. So it doesn't come to arms. It doesn't come to fighting. It doesn't come to swords. It doesn't come to just who's the biggest and baddest with violence. Anyway, please consider a donation to Haley 2020. Sorry, let me say it again. Haley2024.org. There's links on there. You can easily find it on there. And until the next video.